Hello friends, welcome to my first video. So as I promised, today I'm going to be covering the Autobiography of Malcolm X, this book right here. I personally loved reading it. It is a very easy read and it just offers so much. So I invite you to get your own copy and read it for yourself. I don't plan on summarizing it. If anything, I think that it would be more productive for me to talk about the different lessons that I personally gained and offer it to you as a kind of guide if in case you would also like to read it. In case you have no idea who Malcolm X was, I'm going to link in the description a video from TRT World that does a great job of summarizing his background.
I've never at any time made any statement that anybody can even interpret to indicate that I believe in initiating acts of aggression or violence indiscriminately against people. But I do believe when people are being oppressed and are the victims of brutality, that they are within their rights to defend themselves. And when they defend themselves, in my opinion, this is not violence. This is self-defense.
One important lesson that we can learn is, this idea of what does it mean to be violent. All throughout the autobiography, we're told of so many different ways that Malcolm X's youth was plagued by instances of racism, oppression, discrimination, lack of support, all of these things that aren't necessarily, physically violent, but are nonetheless instances of violence. And with that said, it's interesting to consider the type of image that plagued him as a minister, because even though he was a religious minister, nonetheless not Christian. If anything, he very much denounced Christianity. He claimed that it was a religion that catered to the white community. But nonetheless, even though he was a religious minister, he was always touted as being a hate preacher because he believed that the only, true solution to the Black liberation question was completely separating from the white supremacist structure. And that is completely in opposition to Martin Luther King's message of integration.
Not a temporary solution which will benefit only the hand-picked upper-class Negroes, but a solution divinely designed to solve the plight of the black masses in this country permanently and forever. In order to trick our people away from God's true solution, the government is trying to deceive our people with a false solution, a phony solution, a deceitful solution called token integration.
And he's famous for advocating for Black liberation by any means necessary. He was tired of being told that the only way for the Black community to be given respect in this country was by participating in the structure that had taken away, their rights in the first place. So again, he advocated for Black militarization, which was in a way a foundation upon which groups such as the Black Panther Party arose. And the response was to basically label him a hate preacher, just the same way that, the Black Panther Party was labeled a terrorist organization. One must question why a Black military group is immediately labeled a terrorist organization, while, white supremacist military groups all throughout the United States are not treated in that same way and are simply labeled a domestic hate problem. Another way to conceptualize it would be to imagine that you're being attacked. Well, if you attack the person that is attacking you, should you then be considered violent? No, you were acting in self-defense. So that was one of the most important lessons that I gained from reading the autobiography of Malcolm X is, just rethinking what does it mean to be violent in America today. And while Malcolm X wrote about these experiences in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there's a clear parallel to recent events with police brutality. Trevor Noah did a segment recently talking about, this concept of a social contract that we all kind of are expected to upkeep. A social contract that, in a way, Martin Luther King Jr. fought to reform. And yet Black communities and brown communities, they are repeatedly violated against. So my question is, like, are we going to continuously believe that this is a problem that can just be solved through reform and not through a complete dismantling of the structure? Because at the end of the day, racism, yes, it is, there are microaggressions, there are individual actions, but I do not think that it is productive to put it on the individual when in reality the vast majority of the problem is systemic racism.
Who taught you, please, who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Another topic that Malcolm X's teachings focus on is this idea of dismantling white supremacist ideology in popular culture. In the first chapters of the book, Malcolm X reflects on his search for a personal identity, but also a Black identity. He criticizes himself for conking his hair, for example, which was a hairstyle that involved using red devil lye, which was a very corrosive material, to straighten his hair. And he analyzes it and wonders, well, why did he feel the need to do that in the first place, And this is still very much a problem that we still face today. I mean, just in the way that certain hairstyles are permitted in the workplace, well, why do we consider certain hair to be professional and not other types of natural hair? It's a question of why one cannot feel comfortable in their own body and why we as a society follow and uphold social conventions that are designed to exclude. Another example is the fact that Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little. He changed his name after learning that that was the name that slave masters had given his family. By changing his name and taking control over kind of like a facet of his identity, he knew that it was a form of resisting white influence.
Negroes in this country are beginning to realize that we are not a minority. We're only a minority in the American context. But in the worldwide context, we are part of the majority of oppressed people who are struggling against their oppressor or oppression. And this is what changes the thinking and also the tactics of even American Negroes in their struggle for freedom.
February 1965 was the month that Malcolm X was assassinated in Harlem, New York City. As the last chapter of the autobiography kind of concentrates on, Malcolm X's perspective on the Black liberation question had changed very dramatically after a religious pilgrimage that he made to Mecca, the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. He realized that all of his life he was looking at the issue of Black liberation from a very narrowed white versus Black perspective, when in reality it should be looked at as a oppressed versus oppressor dynamic. By looking at the issue through the lens of class, we can see a much more clearer picture of what is going on at a global scale. For example, a lot of people in the United States might think, well, how is it that we discriminate against Black people if there's a lot of Black millionaires? A lot of people really do think that a long list of millionaires signifies some kind of progress. Well, one needs to consider, well, how do these Black millionaires make their money? Let's give Beyonce as an example. I mean, she's widely considered to be a kind of icon of Black feminism, when in reality, I mean, she has a sports apparel company. I know that for sure. How is it that she can consider herself to be a Black feminist icon when her brand exploits Black and brown women abroad? Returning back to the book, so Malcolm X really did understand at the end of his life that it was not, again, a black versus white issue, that it was much more nuanced than that it was much more accurately depicted through the lens of class, looking at poor versus rich, looking at, power versus powerless, etc., etc. And that it was only after dismantling these global systems of power, which are mainly controlled through capitalism, as we know now, only then do we really have a chance at dismantling all of the branches that really do feed off of it. And that includes, patriarchy, that includes racism, and of course, that includes the destruction of the environment. I decided to focus on Malcolm X for this video because as somebody that grew up in the public education system in America, I never learned about him as a civil rights figure. I knew about Martin Luther King Jr., but it was only after I had moved to Harlem in New York City that I really, learned from living in a historically black neighborhood who Malcolm X was and his legacy. It is my opinion that a small but significant facet of systemic racism is the fact that so much of Black history in America is not widely distributed. And the history that is included is without a doubt watered down.
So that was my short review of the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Again, I invite you to get your own copy. I wouldn't be able to cover all of the content of the book. It would just be, an hour long or 2 hours long, and I didn't want to bore you too much. So if you know anybody that could benefit or that would be interested in learning more about this, please share this video with them. I would really appreciate it. And like, subscribe, do all of the, usual YouTube stuff, I guess. I'm going to be posting more videos. I've been conceiving of this project for a while now, so it's exciting. If you have any topics or books or thought-provoking material that you think that I could cover, that is related, of course, to radical thought, I would be more than happy to look it over. So link it in the description or write it down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.